Broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Welcome, everybody. Thanks so much for joining us tonight. I'm Dr. Allison Kurt, the president of the Northern Chapter for SCPGA, and we're really excited to host tonight a great webinar, Super Speed Golf. I've had the privilege to see this presentation a couple of times over the past year, and recently just got my Super Speed 6, so I'm excited to share this information. Our chapter is excited to share this information with the entire section to give you a little bit of information to maybe thirst your quench for how to get more speed in your golf swing. Tonight, I am joined by Mike Napoleon, PGA member, and Kyle Shea, who are the co-founders of Super Speed Golf. Now, Mike is going to be the primary presenter tonight, and he is a PGA certified professional and also TPI certified. And he and Kyle launched Super Speed Golf in 2014. And as in little as 6 years, there's been more than 700 touring pros who are actively using the system, and it's making an impact globally. Now, Mike regularly speaks at seminars and coaching summits, and I recently saw him in January of this year at the Northern California PGA Teaching Summit, where we were both presenting on some different topics, and was really captivated by Super Speed Golf, which sort of led me into purchasing my own set of sticks to try to build some more speed in my swing. So we're excited to have him share not only about super speed training, but golf biomechanics and coaching practices. We're excited to have Kyle with us as well to join in. Now, if you have any questions during the presentation, there is a little bit of a box to your bottom right that has questions. That's where you can go ahead and type in your questions. And so after the presentation, there'll be an open dialogue and a discussion where you can add some more. I do want to thank our entire chapter board for helping put on some education and being able to share it across section boundaries. And also a big thanks to Bryce and Jeff Johnson at headquarters for helping us get this set up with the technology and the platform. So enjoy the presentation. Mike and Kyle, thanks so much for being with us tonight, and go ahead and take it from here.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Allison. Great to see you again, even though it's digitally. Glad that you got started with the training. We're looking forward to hearing some big results out of you in the next little bit. Yeah, I just want to reiterate, one of the things that we've found to be the most effective when we do these digital platforms really is that we're here to help answer your questions, about our products at Super Speed Golf or our training protocols, or honestly, anything else that we have knowledge about that we can help you with. We're happy to try to answer those questions. So, Kyle and I have been in that world of, running kind of high-level golf performance academies for a while now. We've seen a lot of the things that work, the things that don't, and one of the reasons that now basically our full-time gig is speaking about Super Speed Golf and promoting Super Speed Golf is we do feel like we found something that really works for almost every person that picks it up. I mean, we really don't see any negative results out of this, and you're really helping almost anybody that touches these training products, help them increase speed, which obviously is a big piece about the game today. So just to reiterate what Allison was saying, there is a questions pane if you look at your little menu bar on GoToMeeting, and you can type any questions that you might have in there. We'll go ahead and get those started after this little intro presentation about some of the basics about our products, and then we'll just try to get in and answer as many questions as we possibly can. Like I said, if it's something that we have knowledge about that we can help you with, that could maybe progress your teaching along in any way, we're happy to try to help. So to kind of get started, where this all came from, was really where we were running golf performance academies. Kyle actually ran all of the health and wellness and training sides. I ran the golf coaching, equipment fitting side, but we had a team of great professionals around us at our facilities where we had fitness trainers and rehab specialists, and we even had performance coaches and mental coaches, and then equipment fitting specialists. So we really had all of those kind of great minds around to help not only develop training practices, but also in the case of Super Speed Golf products. We also had a lot of the fancy technology that's out there to be able to test this stuff to see what was really going on when a player used our training products, which we do feel like is something that still has separated us from a lot of the other training aid, training gizmo type companies that are out there, is that our scientific training principles, and the product is really secondary to the training process that goes on when a player starts doing this. So some background here on just how we sort of developed this process and why we felt it was important. We were trying to answer this question. We were trying to really figure out what's going to affect how far a golfer hits a golf ball. And not just, I want to be able to answer this question for any golfer that steps through, regardless of, their experience, their skill, their age, their, all the different pieces. I want to come up with some type of a system where I could evaluate all of the different possible variables that can affect how far somebody can hit a golf ball. Now, why would we want to do that as golf coaches? Well, I mean, on our intake assessments over about 10 years worth of time, I think we had maybe one person out of 1,000 that came in and didn't specifically request that they would want to hit the golf ball further if they could. And it was a question on our evaluation form, was basically, would hitting the golf ball 10 or 20 yards further help you? And we had predominantly everybody said yes to that question. I think if you ask your students that, I think it's also a very common yes that you're going to get. The converse to that statement's just laughable. I mean, how many people come into your lesson tee or your studio and say, man, my game would be awesome if I could just hit it like 20 yards shorter, give it to me. Like, I would be the best golfer in the world. And I mean, it never happens, right? That just doesn't exist. So distance has been kind of that area of the overall, I would say, coaching paradigm that we've really tried to become specialists in and tried to figure out every single thing we can find about what's going to affect how far a player can hit a golf ball. So just in a broad sense, we've broken this into 4 main categories. The first, you can go ahead and move. Yeah, the first is going to be physical. So in this category, we're looking at every possible physical characteristic of that player. So this is going to involve strength, it's going to involve mobility, flexibility, functional range of motion, coordination, balance. It's also going to start to get into things like force generation, power. Coordination's a big piece there, and just the ability to be able to motor control the body is a huge piece. So there's a lot of different areas to the physical side that we find to be very important to how far a player can hit a golf ball. I'd also look at this from a physical development standpoint with our junior athletes. I think it's also really important to consider that, junior athletes need to develop physically in many ways, even more importantly than they develop skill areas in certain points of their development in order to, optimize or create an optimal athlete that plays golf in their early 20s. We can talk more about that later if you'd like, but I think that's another big piece that we look at. The second category, we're going to see, I've already got Bryce trained here on moving the slides. This is going to be good. So he's going to be able to pick up the cues. It's great. The second one, which obviously near and dear to my heart as a golf coach, would be swing mechanics. I like to think of swing mechanics as our ability to put skill on top of the physical characteristics of our body to accomplish a goal. So if we look at that on a very broad level, we like to use a model that we call the speed pyramid. Speed pyramid consists of 3 different layers that are all interconnected and really affect the speed and power production of every different swing that we get. The bottom layer of this pyramid is something that's been talked about a lot now in recent years, especially in the golf industry, which is going to be ground force mechanics, ground reaction, force pressure, all of those pieces. But essentially what we're talking about here is how the player interacts with the ground that's going to produce forces and torques that are going to affect the player in how that player is able to rotate. And the golf swing is a rotational motion, so it's very important to look at how do those forces and torques affect rotation. And that's the middle part of the pyramid where we start to look at rotational sequencing. So this is going to be all of your kinematics. This is going to be how the different segments of the swing, at what point do they start to change direction, how fast do they go, how fast are they able to stabilize, how efficient are they at transferring rotational speed from one segment to the next. All of that's that middle part of the pyramid that we call rotational sequencing. The top of the pyramid is really how a golfer is able to take that rotational speed that's been created below, use their arms, hands, and the golf club to apply that rotational speed to the golf ball, and then effectively, hit the shot. So I think it's a very important piece to look at all three of those independently and also look in detail at how they interrelate. Now, that's a webinar for another couple days probably that we could get into. And if you guys have questions about any of those categories, we're happy to answer them. But it's a very interesting piece to look at mechanics in a broader sense, outside of just what a player's swing looks like on video or the style, but actually to look at how these different elements work either or work efficiently or maybe work inefficiently, and you can find big gaps in the way a player is creating speed and power. The next category, which is one that I also think is incredibly important to the overall game of golf, is what we call equipment. Now, we look at this in a broader sense than just what type of club is the player using. Obviously, that's a key part of the equation. But what I'm really talking about in the equipment category is all of your launch details. So this is going to be all of the different things that you look at on TrackMan. So this is going to be spin rate and attack angle and all of those different pieces that come together to actually get you the true realization of distance out of your golf swing. Because again, we can look at this, and we had a question last week actually, it was really good. It's like, well, if I increase my swing speed by 5 or 6 miles an hour with your set, does that, how many more yards does that mean I'm going to get? Well, there's a lot more variables in there to really look at. In a perfect world, if you increased your golf swing by 5 or 6 miles an hour, I would expect, depending on where you were starting, for you to probably gain somewhere between about 14 and 20 yards off the tee. Now, that's assuming that, number one, before you were hitting the ball efficiently and creating good launch conditions, and after you're also creating those same good launch conditions. We actually find it's incredibly important to look at equipment fitting after you've gotten through the first part of our training, because if you have increased your swing speed by 5 or 6 miles an hour, it's very likely that there's some new optimization that needs to take place that can be done either by just changing the club around or changing some certain things about impact that can make a huge difference in how far you actually hit the ball off the tee. We also like to talk about equipment as being really one of, and I'll consider it the second fastest way to help somebody increase distance off the tee. I'm a little biased, but I can prove it here. I mean, your average driver club fitting, if we took a survey, probably takes somewhere around 45 minutes to conclude. So you get somebody in 45 minutes in a driver, and they probably gain a few yards off the tee. Well, our protocols on average only take about 5 minutes, so it's faster to do it with our stuff. But it's harder to tell jokes on these digital platforms. We're trying and we're experimenting. Anyway, the last category, which is the one that we've become a little more popular for talking about at this point, because this is really the one that we brought to the golf industry, or at least brought to the forefront of training in the golf industry, is what we call the neurological elements of speed. Now, when I say neurological, what I mean is, again, I'm not talking about the physicality of the person. I'm not specifically talking about their mechanics or those force production elements of the swing. I'm also not talking about the equipment. What I'm talking about here when I say neurological has to do, the next slide, which is something that we call a motor unit. So this has to do with how our brain controls our body and what our brain expects from our body when we try to make any different type of movement, in this case, specifically the golf swing. So let's look at it this way. That blue squiggly thing at the top there is called a motor neuron, and those live in your brain. Now, these motor neurons in our brain actually house all of the different motor programs for every different motion and movement that we do. And in a somewhat oversimplified sense, when we step on the first tee and decide to take a swing with driver, our brain selects the appropriate motor program and runs it. When that program runs, when we pull the trigger and this goes, what physically happens is a electrical signal travels down, starting our brain, travels down our central nervous system, out all of our nerves to the muscles that are involved in that motor program, and then those muscles respond with that given motion. Now, that's a really key thing to look at, because there's more to this equation, and the biggest piece that affects, how we help people increase speed with super speed golf has to do with expectation. And that's that when your brain sends that signal, it has a certain expectation of what the motion and how fast the motion is going to occur in your body. And what we find, you can move to the next slide. What we find is that with a process of brain training, essentially, we can start to get your brain to expect a faster reaction speed from the muscles of your body to that exact same motor program that you've already been doing. So what's cool about this is we're not changing your body physically. We're not, in any major way changing the mechanics of the swing. We're certainly not changing the equipment. What we're really doing is just helping the player access speed that their body's already capable of producing, and their brain has just, for whatever reason, shut off. And we can talk about that more in the Q&A as well, if you'd like. Okay. So let's look at how this actually works practically. If we move on, and this slide has a few more clicks in it, so you're going to have to kind of move through this one. But, we have 3 clubs in our Overspeed training set at Super Speed Golf. There's a green one, a blue one, and a red one. The green one's about 20% lighter than the player's driver. The blue's about 10% lighter, and the red's about 5% heavier. And this is relative to all types of different drivers. So that's why we have a bunch of different sets. So, in this particular instance, we're talking about just a standard men's driver that we balanced out at 312 grams. But again, there's a range of ideal here. So like within about 10 to 15 grams of these ranges, we don't see any degradation in the effect of the training. But when you get into like a ultralight driver or junior clubs, that's why we have like a senior ladies set. We have junior sets. They're based around clubs that are different weights. So what we tend to see in the training, when we give a player a club that's 20% lighter than their normal driver, we see them on average swing that club about 19% faster than their normal swing speed. Now that's a lot. This is like a player that, swings at, 100 miles an hour, swinging at almost 120 miles an hour. And what we find is that just in a handful of swings, that player's brain starts to expect this faster reaction speed. So then we can add a little bit of resistance back by adding a little bit of weight back to the club. So now we go to that blue club that's only 10% lighter, and we still see the player swing 17% faster than their normal swing speed. Then we go to a club that's actually even heavier than their normal driver, and during that training, we'll still see them increasing their swing speed by about 12% on average. Now, again, that's a big deal, and that's kind of what shows this neurological process of speed training, because if I just give you a heavy club on its own, your club speed with that heavy club is going to go down every time. But because we do this neurological reset, if you will, with these 2 light clubs in our training protocols, that's why we see this big jump even with that club that's slightly heavier. And it's one of the reasons that we see such fast increases in swing speed during our training. So if we answer the question of what is overspeed training, by definition, in the most simple sense, is just making a player's body move faster than it normally does, during a motion that it already knows how to do, in order to reset what your brain expects from your body during that motion. So it's actually a very simple process. It's just something that hadn't really been done in the golf world for a long time. We definitely seen some of this training in track and field sports. We'd seen a lot of this training in baseball, but we hadn't really seen a lot of it in golf. And we really find it to be something that, since nobody had really done it before, it's something that everyone can pick up and get some pretty big gains on right away. We do some other really cool stuff during our training as well. We can move on here. One of them is something that we call non-dominant training. So that's exactly what it means. It actually means that you're going to have your players swinging left-handed if they're right-handed and right-handed if they're left-handed. And I know that sounds crazy on first thought, but there's a lot of benefit to non-dominant training. The most obvious one is just simply balancing out the player's body from a use standpoint. We're in a sport where we use one side of our rotational power all the time, and over time that can really wear on a player's body and actually cause a lot of different pain issues and different medical problems that are there. I mean, how many people, if you're sitting at your house and you're a right-handed golfer, walk up to the mirror and you see your left shoulder like just tilted higher than your right? Like, I mean, you see this all the time when you assess golfers' posture, but you'll see this like tilt that's just kind of odd for players. It's not good for you long term as a human being. So I think that's a big piece with the non-dominant training that's there. Aside from that, though, there's also benefits biomechanically. So when we swing on our non-dominant side, what we're actually doing is we're taking our backswing into what's going to become the lead side of our golf swing. So I'm making a backswing. Let's say I'm right-handed. Making a backswing, I'm loading into my left side. When I'm loading into my left side, I'm activating a lot of different muscles around my left hip, leg, back, all of those different things that I might not have been using very much before. Now those motor units are going to be more active on that side of my body. When I go back to my right-handed swing, those are going to become the muscles that help to stabilize the different segments of my swing and transfer rotational velocity up the chain. So we actually see a pretty big bump in just biomechanical efficiency from nothing else than just doing the non-dominant swings in our training. Now, as you can see on the screen here, we have 5 different levels of protocols at Super Speed Golf. These are progressive. We actually start every athlete regardless of skill level, ability, athleticism. We start everybody in level 1. We recommend that usually for 6 weeks. Now, some players might even spend longer in level 1. We actually even have tour players, one that we've been working with recently, that we may never get out of the level 1 protocol, but it doesn't matter because less is more sometimes with this training. We progress these protocols to get more demand on coordination in the drills, more demand on force production, and really helping people kind of break through their own athletic barriers that sometimes your brain has put in place. These training protocols are all available on our website in full video format. There's also PDFs you can download, record sheets, everything you'd ever need at superspeedgolf.com just under the training session. This actually is a cool thing too, because this encompasses a long time worth of training. I mean, we have professional players around the world that have been working with these protocols for years. And I mean, some of them 5 and 6 years. There's a lot of time to be spent going through these protocols that can get big gains for your players. We can move on. So the next slide, this is going to look at kind of what to expect from the training when you start doing this yourself or with one of your players. So just let me explain this chart real quick. So that blue line is effective club speed. So that's club speed while hitting a golf ball before going through a super speed training session. The red line is an average club speed after going through a training session, hitting a golf ball. This is all effective club speed hitting a ball. So what we see is a very common pattern when people start doing this training. Usually after the first session, we're going to see a jump in club speed of about 5% on average. So, a player going from about 100 miles an hour to about 105. They'll see this effect if they, hit balls before and hit balls after. They're going to see about a 5 mile an hour jump in swing speed. Now, it's not magic. It's not going to, be permanent right then after the very first session, even though we've seen more than our share of players that have, basically looked down at the launch monitor and been like, really? I mean, is that for real? Like, did you guys like push a button or change something here? Because like they can't believe that they got that big of a gain in like a 5-minute training protocol. But I do think that that's one of the cool pieces is you can do this with a player in a lesson and show them these results right away. And then it's important to explain to them that there's a normalization period. It takes about 6 to 8 weeks of regular practice. And we define that as 3 days a week with a day off in between of going through these protocols, which, I mean, the protocols take about 5 to 10 minutes to go through post warm-up. So we're looking at somewhere on average about 20 minutes a week of effort put in to get 5% gain in swing speed. I think that can be a really big deal. So what I want to look at here though is that after that 6 to 8 week normalization period, you're going to enter a plateau phase. So now this is going to be another period where now that player's brain is kind of starting to expect this faster speed. And we're still working on the training and still doing these, but you're not going to see these big before and after gains in every session. This is a time when I think as a coach, we have to make sure that people understand the expectation that they're not going to just continue to get this like linear gain of club speed the longer they do it. They're going to have to fight through this plateau phase for a little while, but it's also something that we can take advantage of. We like to get a lot of our touring athletes into one of these solid plateau phases when a season is coming up, because last time I checked, hitting the ball 10 yards over the green was not a good thing for the golf world. It's easier for our baseball fans because, I mean, people using our baseball products, like 30 feet further over the fence is fine. It doesn't matter at all. But like 10 yards over the green can be a real mess sometimes if you're playing tournament golf. So we actually want our players to be in these stable plateaus during the competitive, highly competitive parts of their season. As a coach, I think you can use that to your advantage. You can, when there's a little bit more of an off season or some downtime, you go through the protocols hard, you get to one of those stable plateaus. That's a great time to refit the equipment, re-optimize the equipment around that player's game. And then, you can actually reduce the frequency of the training a little bit. And you can basically extend that plateau phase throughout the course of the season, and then you can really ramp up the intensity the next time you have a little bit of downtime and push for a secondary jump, usually of about 3.5% on average, another normalization, another plateau. So I think over time you can kind of work through those that cycle of jump, normalization, plateau, and then after 3-4 years worth of this training, the jumps are going to be smaller and so far in between that's not really the main goal. You're going to use the system at that point that the way you see a lot of our players on TV using it is a way to just basically prime their body to get ready to function at peak velocity, peak performance. Okay, moving on. One of the questions we get a lot is why do these systems work as well as they do? If we can move to the next slide, Chris. Oh, actually, let's even talk about this first. I forgot this was in here. So we released a new product back in January of this year at the PGA show that uses something called Counterweight Training. So we found that our main Overspeed training system, we saw the biggest gains in the bottom two pieces of the speed pyramid. So we see the biggest gains in sort of improving the way that player uses the ground and improving their rotational sequencing. And we do see usually a gain still in the hand and arm velocity, hand and arm speed in the swing, but we always felt like there was more we could get there. And one of the ways that we researched to do that was something called counterweight training. So counterweight training is really changing the physics of the motion around a little bit so that we can kind of get a targeted overspeed training effect on just one area of the swing. And in this case, we're really looking at hand and arm speed, release speed, those sort of things. The next slide, I'll actually show you a picture of our SuperSpeed C Club, which actually has its own protocols. It's a single club training system. So when you go to our website, when you go to training, you either select Overspeed training or Counterweight training. Counterweight training are the 3 protocols for SuperSpeed C. So we've found this to be very effective for players that are just starting out. We've also found it to be very effective for players that have been doing super speed training for a long time. In fact, some of our players that have been doing the training for 3 or 4 years are getting another 4 to 6% gain in speed by adding on the super speed C training to their normal routine. So it's a pretty cool thing. We can move on to the next slide. If there's other questions about super speed C, I'm happy to answer those. So one of the main questions we get a lot is, why does this training work so quickly? Like, why do we see results after essentially the first session? And it kind of goes back to that motor unit idea of what does your brain expect from your body when you make a motion. So we have to look at that a little bit more closely, and we use a model that we call athletic ceiling. So think of athletic ceiling as any human being's peak optimal potential to create speed and power. So this is like the swing can move, every single variable perfectly put together. That's your absolute peak athletic ceiling. Now, that is based on 2 components. One of them is that human being's genetics, and the other one is going to be the different developmental activities that player did, from the time they were born up until about their late teens, early 20s. That's really that period of time you have to, develop the highest athletic ceiling possible. Now, after our early 20s, we can't really change where our athletic ceiling is. We may have created elite potential for explosive athleticism and have the potential to be on the long drive tour. Or, we may have not done nearly as many athletic activities when we're younger and don't have as high of an athletic ceiling. The cool thing here is that it's two-pronged. We have products for kids that can try to build that athletic ceiling as high as we possibly can and create the opportunity to have explosive athletes. The other side of it is most of our players, most of our clients that use our products are over the age, they're past their late 20s. They're not going to increase how high their athletic ceiling is. However, we find that everyone, or basically everyone that we've looked at, we don't know what percentage exactly, but we know that they don't function at 100% of their peak athletic potential on every given swing. In fact, just think about ourselves. I mean, I certainly don't. I don't know how many of you out there would feel like you're at 100% of your body's peak capacity. So that gives us a huge window of opportunity. And that's why we say we're accessing speed that player's body's already capable of producing. We're not changing your capability. We're just helping you access a higher level of that capability. And that's one of the reasons that this product works so fast for so many players. Next slide. If you want to learn more about all this, we do have a 3-level online certification class. It is accredited by the PGA of America, so you do get MSR credits for each one of the 3 levels of SuperSpeed Certified. You can find this at superspeedcertified.com. We'll go into a lot more detail into the history of overspeed training and development and best practices. So, think of each one of these levels as looking at a lot more detail of the science of overspeed training, and then really breaking down the mechanical elements of the speed pyramid and looking at practical ways to optimize ground reaction force, rotational sequencing, lag risk mechanics, and a lot of the I would say common pitfalls that we see coaches fall into when coaching those different areas. The last thing that I want to leave everybody with, and then, like I said, we're happy to answer questions for as long as you'd like, is really just how to get this stuff started at your facilities. Now, I know that we've, at this point, different places in the country have more or less restrictions on what we're doing, but we've always found that some type of a small group type of an environment, a clinic environment, is a really great way to funnel new clients into your coaching academies. Really generate a lot of new revenue, a lot of new leads. But those programs themselves, if run properly, can also be big revenue generators for your facility. We have a fully drawn out business model for speed clinics that we've been endorsing for a couple of years now, and highly recommend, if it's something that's possible to do at your facilities, to look into that. And just shoot us an email. We'll probably be sending some follow-up information to the webinar as well. It'll have some information on our speed clinics, but it's basically exactly what we'd recommend on marketing and pricing and all of that. But the big piece on that one is you include a set of the super speed clubs with everybody that signs up, because they need to do the training at home when they're not doing it with you, and you just become that kind of professional eye to walk them through the protocols in the best way, collect data, and show them those objective gains. I mean, we've had facilities in the last year do over $40,000 in revenue just on speed clinics. So something that can be a great benefit if you can get those started at your facility. All right. If you do have any questions, feel free to email us or our team at info@superspeedgolf.com. Our website, superspeedgolf.com, definitely has tons of information, lots of other webinars if you're interested in looking at those, and all of the training is available there. Again, certification program, if you're interested, is at superspeedcertified.com, and always feel free to tag us in social media. All of our handles are at superspeedgolf. So I think that's it for the formal part of today's presentation. Happy to answer any questions at this point, and we'll go from there.
Hey, Mike. So it looks like we had the first question that came in was, can you put preferred grip size on the speed sticks, and what is the butt size?
Yeah, good question. They're just standard driver shafts. I believe they're 6.0s. I would have to check that 100%, but they're just standard graphite driver shafts. So any normal golf grip is going to go on them exactly the same way that you would put your golf grips on your normal golf clubs. Most of our tour players usually change the grips right away and just put whatever they're used to feeling. We haven't we've never done a official study on testing it, but theoretically, there's not going to be that big of a difference because you're not actually hitting a golf ball with these. So changing the grip we believe would have a very small effect on the efficiency of the training. But feel free to change those grips whenever you like.
Alrighty, another question came in. What tour players are actively using these that you know of, if any?
Oh boy, I should probably let Kyle answer some of this. I mean, I would say the bigger question is, I mean, we got to a point where we really just stopped counting. I mean, we had, Kyle, what did we have? Like 17 out of the top 20 in the world at one point?
Yeah, currently we have over 110, 120, somewhere in there, active card-carrying PGA Tour players. Really heavy on LPGA as well. And then international tours, lots on the Corn Ferry Tour, Symetra Tour. So it's definitely spread out between, I think, the men and the women. I think the women are starting to request more and more from us as they are seeing that their game is heavily affected by that as well. And we also work with a lot of them privately.
I'd say it went like wildfire through the Champions Tour, basically like 4 years ago. We've probably created programs for, I'd say, ballpark 150 to 180 of those players personally. But again, a lot of the players just either buy the product or, their coach has it or gets them a set or those kind of things. So a lot of people are using it. It's not the easiest thing to track, but there's a lot.
Awesome. We just had one more question come in too. How does this training affect sequencing?
Okay, great question. That's one of those that we could probably talk about for days. I think the biggest piece to this that I'll answer first is that it makes a huge difference on where the player's starting and how that player sequences, or whether there's efficiency or inefficiency in the way they sequence when they're starting. So that's kind of the big piece there. We find that the drills that we have in our protocols, we have a lot of, I would say, sequencing specific drills in our protocols. So we have things like the step change of direction swings, heel stomp swings, all the different like footwork coordination drills. A lot of those are really working on getting the lower body leading the golf swing more. So the very common thing we see is that, players that don't do a good job disassociating their lower body from their torso, don't use the lower body very well in their golf swing, so they're very upper body dominant kind of players. We generally see a huge increase in the activity in the lower body in just a very short amount of time of doing these protocols, mainly because it's very hard to do like a step change of direction, which is basically like a wind up step through swing, without being able to activate your lower body, because if you didn't, you'd probably fall over. So it's kind of like a forced issue there to work on sequencing. But we do find that there are a lot of people that get some big results there. We actually, in week 20 of our training protocols, which I had a little chart in there with the pros, you can look at them, but they're called our ASD protocols, which stands for Advanced Speed Development. So we find that most players through 20 weeks of the training, if they had a deficiency in the way they sequence, are going to probably have alleviated a lot of that deficiency by doing all the drills that are in our training protocols. However, if they haven't by week 20, and either their coach can identify that they still have a lot of sequencing inefficiencies, or in our certification program, we go through some very crude manual type testing to be able to flesh some of that out. We actually have a protocol, because our ASD2, we call it a rebound protocol, which specifically works on acceleration, deceleration chains in the kinematic sequence in the body. So there's specific drills there to start to really work on increasing that rotational efficiency of the golf swing. But in a general sense, like I said, it just depends on where the player's starting to really be able to tell you exactly what the gains would normally be.
Awesome. You may have answered this, but one more question came in. Is the non-dominant training in reverse swing direction or normal direction?
No, I mean, it's like we actually have the player. So if you're a right-handed golfer, right, you're going to set up and make right-handed normal golf swings. We're going to literally have the players switch their golf grip to a non-dominant left-handed grip turn around and swing in a non-dominant direction. So actually completely, mirror the motor pattern on the opposite side, which again, we found a lot of big benefits to non-dominant training. It's also a great social media opportunity. The first time you have your players do that, take some video or pictures of those first non-dominant swings. It can be funny right off the start, but also in about 3 or 4 weeks, you're going to show them that their non-dominant swings a lot of times look as good or better as their dominant side swings.
Awesome. Kyle, I'll go ahead and let you chime in. You might have a few more questions.
Absolutely. Thank you, Bryce. Mike, can you also talk a little bit more about what we do for juniors to start?
Yeah, I mean, there are slightly different protocols for juniors. Your youngest kids, you're really looking more at physical athletic development. So those protocols focus less on swinging and more on running fast, throwing hard, jumping high, sprinting, big time physical athletic activities in the youngest ages. Those protocols, again, are all available on our website if you want to take a deeper look in. We also have a number of different junior sets that are specifically designed with kids in mind. So, I mean, the junior sets have smaller grips to fit smaller hand size. They have slightly, obviously, less weight based on junior golf clubs. The shafts are a little bit more flexible, just to kind of balance out to the swing speeds that we're looking at from juniors.
All right. And Mike, can you talk about how best people should track their gains and what we use, and maybe how they can use the technology they might have as well?
Sure. I mean, obviously not everyone's going to have like a $25,000 launch monitor, and actually some of the stuff that we work out at our facilities with TrackMan, we actually use some much simpler devices to use during the training, because as nice as some of those units are, they usually won't measure how fast the club goes without hitting a ball. So if we want to measure speed during the training swings just to see and use it as a direct feedback tool, we've actually been using a launch monitor called the PRGR launch monitor recently, which is available for a whole lot less money than a TrackMan, and actually gives you pretty good accuracy on club speed. It also measures some metrics like ball speed and approximate carry distance that we're finding not to be too far off from some of the really expensive units that are out there. So PRGR launch monitor, check that out. And when you're doing the training, I think it is good to actually take note of your before and after speeds, and then also look at those speeds during the training, because again, the goal here is to be making that club move as fast as possible. So having that feedback is a very good tool.
Great. And the last question I have for you, Mike, was can you talk about some of the pitfalls we see when people might not see the gains that we're looking for, and maybe common troubleshooting tips?
Yeah, I'd say the number one issue that people have is they're just way too they swing too easy and are too careful with their golf swing. I think of this as like a type of training that's different. Like, we're trying to break the mold, if you will, and we want people to actually experiment with different things that may increase their swing speed that they didn't even know were possible. So, I think a lot of times as golf coaches, we can kind of get into that habit of over-coaching some of the detailed mechanical parts of the swing and forgetting that it's a big overall athletic motion that has to work together efficiently. So, we do find that, that's the number one piece, is people just not being aggressive enough in the training and being too careful with their golf swing. Besides that, I think the other one is just people want to do more training than they should. Again, less is more with this type of neuromuscular training. Like 3 days a week with a full day off in between is the most we ever need. We definitely see some athletes that even do a little less than that and still get great results if they're adding in other athletic training on some of those other days. So less is more. We have people that always want to do, they're like, well, I'll train every day and 3 times a day. And what ends up happening is every one of those swings they make isn't at peak performance because they're tired, or, it's just not as intense as only having those couple times a week. So I'd say those are the biggest ones that we see commonly.
Perfect.
All right, Mike. Well, thank you so much for sharing that information with us today. Really great product, and definitely helpful for a lot of our coaches here in Southern California. On behalf of the Southern California PGA, we thank you. Thank you to Allison with the Northern chapter for getting this all lined up and set up as some education and sharing it with the whole section. As a reminder, you all will receive 1 MSR credit for attending today's presentation. And if you'd like to rewatch this presentation, it will be archived on the Southern California PGA YouTube channel.
Outstanding. Well, we really appreciate you guys having us. Again, if there's anything we can do to help, we're here to support. Just reach out to us at any of the given methods, and hope you have a lot of success helping people hit the ball further.
Thank you very much, Mike and Kyle. Great talking with you guys today.
All right. Good night, everyone.